Good. Get my glasses out so I can see what I'm doing. I call the Norton City Council regular council meeting for Tuesday, October 15th, 2019 to order. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance and a moment of silent reflection. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Be seated. Would the clerk call the roll, please?
Mr. Gaynor?
Here.
Mr. McClone?
Here.
Mr. Carrot?
Mr. Carrott's excused.
Mr. Towsley?
Here.
Ms. Whipke? Here. Mr. Pelot?
Here.
Mr. Kernan?
Here. Communications from the public. When your name is called, please step forward to the microphone, give your name and address, and you have 5 minutes. Yeah.
We didn't do damn.
We are now. Holly Miller.
Good evening. My name is Holly Miller, and I am the Senior Administrator for the Department of Community and Economic Development under our County Executive, Eileen Shapiro. And once a year, I go to all 31 communities to remind you, or maybe tell you for the first time, all of the programs that our department has to offer to low to moderate income and poverty level constituents that you have in your community. So what I gave to you this evening is this booklet called the Summit County Community Resource Guide. This replaces our senior handbook that I would have brought out to you last year that had Eileen's picture on the front of it. Please discard that. Use these. This is a collaboration of 8 different agencies that got together to put this information in this book. We also encourage you to put the link to gettingwiser.org on your website. It is a live version of this book, because as soon as you make 5,000 copies of something, you know it's going to be outdated because agencies have come on board since then. So gettingwiser.org will show all the current agencies. And 211 is still a resource option for anyone to call, either from a cell phone or a landline. If you have a need or you know a constituent that has a need, you can pick up 211. You get a live person, 365, 24/7. Tell them what you need, and they will let you know what agencies have funding at that point in time. Inside this book are 3 sheets of paper. The first sheet of paper lists all of our programs that we have available out of our department. I'm going to hit on these very quickly this evening. Our first one is our Community Development Block Grant Funds. We receive a formula allocation from the Department of Housing and Urban Development each year, about $966,000. These funds are used to help low to moderate income individuals or in a low to moderate income area. The City of Norton has been a recipient of these funds for low to moderate income areas in the past. We did your park. We did the playgrounds, and I think the mayor said the park is almost done-ish. And we have put some funds into the community center, which I think is behind me when I'm standing here. We also can help low to moderate income individuals, primarily senior citizens, stay in their home by providing them minor home repairs and ADA accessibility. Another program that we have is our lead-based paint hazard reduction program. You either have a large flyer or small flyer like this. We really need your help getting information out on this one. We partner with the Summit County Health Department. They are the primary recipient from the Department of Housing and Urban Development, and they were just awarded $5.6 million to spend over the next 42 months to reduce lead-based paint in housing built before 1978 that have children living in the home under the age of 6 or visiting 62 hours or more a year. If they meet the income guidelines that are on the back, they can call the health department or my office. They can get an application. We send someone from the health department out to do a lead risk assessment to identify where there's lead-based paint, and then all of that is abated. This program is for homeowners and renters. So if you have landlords that rent to individuals in these income guidelines that have children under the age of 6 living or visiting there, they may be eligible. I'm always income qualifying the tenant, never the landlord. So the landlord could have multiple properties and qualify as long as the tenants meet those income guidelines. We also have the Household Sewage Treatment System Program. We have utilized that quite a bit in Norton. We used this funding from the Ohio EPA to replace failing septic systems. I have a citation from the Health Department. And we also used this to tie individuals in the Nash Heights area. We were able to, so far, tie 18 individuals into public utilities using these funds. And the last program that we have is this sheet of paper here. It's called our Home Weatherization Assistance Program. We get funding from the Department of Energy, about $1.4 million each year to assist individuals living at the poverty level. You notice the income guidelines are a little bit lower than they were for the lead-based paint program. They do kind of equal out as you get kind of more people in the household. This is designed to reduce the energy burden for those living at the poverty level. So if anyone meets these income guidelines, they apply. We send out an energy auditor that is on staff at my office. They spend anywhere from 4 to 6 hours in a home doing a complete energy audit, and then come back, put all the information into a system, and it tells us what we can replace in that client's home to make their home more energy efficient. Typically, it's going to be a new furnace, a new hot water tank, insulation, new refrigerators and freezers, new light bulbs inside and out, and an ashtray fan, which is just a fancy word for a bathroom fan. Just like our lead-based paint program, this program is for renters and homeowners. So if you are a landlord and you meet the income guidelines, or your tenant meets the income guidelines, we're able to assist on that home. We do have the ability to put all these programs together. We're a one-touch, one-application department. So if you have constituents that you think would apply or qualify for something, they can just contact me. We get them one application, and then we plug all the funding sources into their home so we can provide those wraparound services, get them all the help that they need, because once we leave a home, we want to make sure that we don't need to revisit that for the next 10 to 15 years. I know that was a lot of information. You have my card. You have all this information. I can send all of this to you in a PDF form. If you would like it, you can email me so that you can have it available to community meetings that you may have for your own wards. Does anybody have any questions?
Go ahead,
Yes,
Charlie.
Ms. Whipke.
I'm going to ask specifically on your sewage treatment system. Say a resident would be contacting you. I understand that they would have to be already told by Summit County that they needed to replace their septic system, correct?
Yes, it's citation driven.
What I would want to know, they would be eligible to get help as long as you had funding, correct?
That is correct.
Would you not know whether you had funding available when somebody called you to be able to tell them?
Right now, we do not have funding.
You do not
We
have
have not
funding.
gotten it.
But when you get it, you will know, and if somebody called you, you would be able to tell them, yes, we do have funding.
I know if I have funding when they call, but I won't know if I have funding when they apply, because it's a first come, first served basis.
How long does it generally last?
We get about $150,000 a year, $8,000 to $10,000 a unit. So it just depends. Right now, I have a wait list of about 15 people.
And those will be taken care of before anybody else new would get in?
Yes.
Well, then what would happen to somebody that called you, they've already been failed, and you don't have the money to help them, then it would just fall upon them, or they're just SOL?
If they qualify for our program, we
Yes.
let the health department know, and any administrative orders stop until we get additional funding. If they do not qualify, we notify the health department, and administrative hearings continue.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else? Thank you very much
Thank
for
you for
coming.
letting me come out.
Pat Hunt?
Hi, good evening. My name is Pat Hunt, and I'm running for Summit County Sheriff in 2020. We have a March 17th primary, so with the time change coming next month, I very well could be in your areas in the evening hours. So my plan was to meet and greet tonight, just let you know who I was, and my plan was to contact the local police to let them know that when we're on this canvassing in a certain area, to give the police our license plate numbers and descriptions in a place we're canvassing. I've been a police officer for 30 years. I know it generates a lot of calls when you have cars parked on streets and people going door to door. So I'm trying to meet with all city council throughout Summit County, as I am tonight. Just advise them that when we're in the area, we'll be respectful to call the police and let them know who we are, the vehicle descriptions, and then call them back again when we've cleared the area.
Thank you.
Any questions?
Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time tonight, guys.
Thank you.
Mark Safran?
Good evening, members of council, mayor. My name is Mark Safran. I'm with Safe Harbor of Norton. We're pleased to be in front of you tonight. We were here last week in front of zoning and planning. I'll keep my comments brief in case there are some questions. My partner and I are both deeply regretful of any misunderstanding or missteps in the beginning. We did talk about that last week to the Planning and Zoning Committee. You do have a packet that they had last week that has all of our information. We want to be good stewards in this community. We did say last week that we wanted to increase our board from 5 members to 7 and have 2 elected officials, if it's not a conflict of interest, serve on our board. We've already had interest from 1 or 2 parties from last week. We also would like to create an advisory committee of 5 members from the community so that we have total transparency on exactly what it is that we're doing. We are a sober living facility. There's no treatment on the grounds. They are tenants. The residents that live there, the tenants that live there have to be in protocol, have to be in treatment. They're all clinically assessed before they are admitted to the property, and they must complete and maintain their sobriety. If they do not maintain their sobriety, they are removed from the property and they are taken back to the community where they come from. We have had some residents of Norton in our sober living facility, and we hope that we have many more in the future that we can assist and help. My sobriety started 7 years ago. I was a successful executive. I realized and I was educated that I have a disease, and the disease is addiction and alcoholism. I've spent the last 7 years of my life trying to give back to the community, trying to help people that are afflicted from the same disease. So, again, it's an honor to be in front of you tonight. I hope to get to know you over the coming years, and I will stop now and see if there are any questions.
I have a question. How did you arrive here in Norton to begin with, period?
So Rachel Sharp, who is on our board, was the realtor for the property. We were looking for properties in various communities. We've looked in Wadsworth, Seville, Norton, in this general area. There are certain treatment facilities. One is in Wadsworth, Licata Way. We've also worked with another institution called CATS. They needed some sober living because it is known that if you have an access where you have the participants in close proximity to the treatment center, there's a greater likelihood that they'll get treatment. The property was appealing, and so we made an offer on a land contract, and that's how we acquired the property.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
I have a question.
Mr. Tousley?
Yeah, you had stated that if a resident doesn't stay sober, then they will be removed.
Correct.
What are the means of removal?
So we do random drug tests. The facilities or where they're receiving treatment do random drug tests. We're in constant communication. Our resident manager is in the audience today, Richie Najjar, who lives on the property. He's there 24 hours, 7 days a week. When we find that someone has broken the agreement and all of the papers, all of the protocols are in the packet that you have, we would then call family, or we would have, if they have a violation of any type of parole, we would inform the police, and the corrective actions then would be taken. We just don't drive them into the middle of Norton and say, "See you, good luck, have a good life." We would never do anything like that.
Is there like for lack of better words, a contract they sign with you when they come in?
There's an enrollment packet that they agree to, and under those guidelines, that's the only way they'll be entered into the property.
Is that a verbal agreement or
No, it's a written agreement.
Written agreement. Okay, thank you.
And just so everyone knows, I should take a moment now just to let everyone know that council has, or the clerk of council has received a timely letter asking for a hearing before council, and that will be scheduled for November 12th. So we will not be looking at anything tonight, but on November 12th, we'll have a public hearing, just so that everyone knows. Mr.
11th.
I'm sorry, was it November 11th?
November 11th, yeah.
Okay, sorry about that. November 11th.
Can I just ask, does that mean that in the next meetings up until November 11th, there'll be no action taken on Safe Harbor until that time?
That's correct.
Yes. All right. Any other questions?
Up to how many residents will you have at any given time?
So currently we have 15 men, I believe. So we have 15 men today. There's a duplex, as you, some of you may be aware. If you're not, it is in your packet, the outlines of the property. There's a single-family home that we will be rehabbing. Those two facilities, those two buildings will house approximately 23 to 26 men. The motel needs substantial work. As I know many of you know, there was some activity occurring in that motel, and it needs to be brought up to a standard. So until that point in time, which will be several years down the road, that will be left vacant. At that point in time, that will be three-quarter housing with men that have gone back to work. They'll be paying rent. They're required to attend meetings at that point in time. That would be about another 20 to 25 individuals. There is also a barn on the property that we intend to rehab, improve it, and make it sort of a multi-purpose, all facility for recreation.
All right. Thank you.
Anything else? All right. Thank you.
Thank you for the questions.
David Wells.
Good evening. Thank you for having us tonight. I just wanted to reiterate a couple of points that my partner Mark talked about. So as part of the enrollment process in Safe Harbor Norton, all residents, tenants go through a formal clinical assessment to determine whether they are eligible to be enrolled in our program. So there's very tight stipulations. People with psychological problems, we do not take violent crimes, sex offenders. None of that happens. They will be dispersed to another facility. So it's our way of kind of controlling who comes into the facility to make sure that they are eligible to our standards and the community at large. And it's a very formal process that takes place. Additionally, there are no medicines dispensed on our property, so there are no drugs, narcotics, or anything on our property. They are dispensed by the treatment facility, which could be one of several different people that we work with. And I'll just reiterate my story. You know, I'm 13 years in recovery, and what drove me to work with Mark to open this facility. I was a successful medical salesperson, X-ray, radiology, ultrasound equipment, and back in December of 2005, somewhere between alcohol and crack cocaine, I found myself homeless. Family man, 5 children, and somewhere along the way I crossed the line and became heavily addicted. I spent 1.5 years in sober living facilities in and around the Cleveland community, and always wanted to give back. So I had the opportunity to rebuild a professional career over the last 13 years. And Mark and I have been on this search or this venture for about 4 years now. And the time was right. We felt the facility and the location was right, not near schools, not near churches, somewhat secluded, natural barrier around the property. And that's what allowed us to open up Safe Harbor of Norton. So, thank you. Any questions?
Before you sit down, if you could give your name and address for the record, please.
David Wells, 216 Moore Road, apartment 2D, Avon Lake, Ohio.
Thank you. Are there any questions?
Yes, Mr. President. You stated that you have a tight stipulations as far as admitting people into that program there, and that you didn't have any criminal activity or no violent or sexual deviance, for lack of a better word. So does that mean you're doing criminal background checks on these people, or how do you determine that?
So our treatment provider does the formal assessment. I'm happy to provide the council what their requirements are. I don't have them at hand, but I do know that it is a clinical, a psychological, and I would assume, I don't know if anybody knows in the audience, that there is criminal background checks. I'm sure that there are.
I would appreciate getting that information.
I will follow that
I'm
up.
sure the rest of council would as well.
Sure, absolutely. Thank you, Charlotte.
Anything else? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Gary Merton.
Hello. I have something that's written here. I'll read it off. It's a
If you could
statement,
give
and
your
I'll-
name and address first.
I will. Gary Merton, 3450 Ruth Drive, Norton, Ohio. And then I can send a copy of the written statement to whoever.
Please do.
Okay. I've lived in Norton for over 40 years and hadn't asked for anything from my local government, but over the last 2.5 years, my neighborhood has had an issue reference a concrete company being operated at 3521 Ruth Drive. The resident applied for a variance in May of 2017. The neighbors all signed a letter stating their opposition to this, and then he had a variance hearing, and it was denied. And he had 60 days to remove the equipment and comply. He hasn't complied to this day. It's been 2.5 years now. Councilwoman Whipke and Councilman Gaynor both observed the blatant violations of the concrete company. I asked for their assistance and they came out. Dozens of contacts with the zoning officer has resulted in no enforcement of the ruling. I've continued for these 2.5 years to make complaints to zoning and the administration with no action being taken by anyone. And I can't even get the administration to say what would constitute an enforceable violation of the variance. Most of my neighbors have given up hope by now, and anyone from this city administration doing anything in regards to resolving the issue, but I continue to call with little or no response. Finally, in August 2019, I had a meeting with Mayor Zita and Robert Fowler. During that meeting, they stated they needed an opinion from the legal advisor to the city and then would get back to me. I'm still waiting on that phone call. Since then, I've called numerous times to try to get in touch with them. No return calls. I've left various messages in the hopes of getting the answer. I've continued to also use the employee action request form online to continue complaining about this specific incident and also other zoning matters. No one responds, they just ignore it. The zoning enforcement has been basically ineffective, to say the least. I was told early on by the zoning official that he was instructed by city council back in the day that he was not to be proactive on enforcement, but to wait to get a citizen complaint. Well, here we are. I've complained, my neighbors have complained, and the city administration has ignored us, and we can't rely on the city administration to respond to its citizens when they have issues that are important to them. What is a neighbor to do? I'm tired, I'm fed up with it, and we just want something done. That's it. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Any questions?
Do you have a paper copy of what you read?
No, but I can email it to whomever if they give me an email address.
Carrie.
Use our website.
Yes.
Yeah. You'll find me under council, clerk of council.
Okay, I'll send it to you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Rachel Sharp.
Good evening. My name is Rachel Sharp. I live at 10147 Mennonite Road, Rittman, Ohio, 44270. It's on the edge of Wadsworth and Rittman. My family and I have lived in Norton for 12 years until recently, where we moved out of Norton. I'm here to support Safe Harbor of Norton. Just want to kind of reiterate the positive influence that I believe safe, sober living facilities have on a community. Living next to the fire department, I've heard my neighbors and I've had family members abuse and become addicts and also being abused with drugs. It's heartfelt to know that we have people who are willing to come into the community and make it stronger and make it better and put other human beings before themselves. I think it's very important that they are taking care of those people who are also not able to take care of themselves most of the time. I'm sure one, or if not all of you, have been affected by someone with an addict problem or alcoholism. I'm just, again, here to support them and their efforts in trying to make a sober living facility possible here in Norton. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Michael Stack.
Michael Stack, 3004 Union Street, Clinton Aluminum. Everything looks pretty good. The 208 feet I like. I think the higher mound would be better and maybe a farther setback from boundary line to edge of mound. I think 30 feet is too close. Also, the gentleman here last week spoke that it was a 24-hour business 5 days a week. You know, all in the summertime, they're going to have their doors open, you know, decimal levels from backup alarms and everything else to the residents behind, the, you know, the 3 houses there. So, and then hopefully, I believe by the map, it looks like the roads or the driveways and parking lots are all paved. I hope that is true. So, but anyway, I would give the city a B on that. So hopefully we can maybe do something to move that barrier back a little bit farther from the 3 residents. Anyway, I'd like to yield the rest of my time to Tanya Vanderveen.
She'll get her 5 minutes.
Oh, we're going to put that on top of? So she.
No, she'll get her 5 minutes. Tanya Vanderveen.
Tanya Vanderveen, 3004 Union Street, Norton. And just for clarification, I was under the impression that you functioned under Robert's Rules of Orders and that someone who chose to speak could yield the remaining bit of their time.
We have our own council rules. Our council rules say each person has 5 minutes.
Okay, then I was misinformed. So first of all, I was not here the night that Michael came to speak to you guys about the house on Union and 23rd that's finally been torn down. I too wanted to extend my thanks to City Council for getting that torn down. It is much, much better, and there are no naked people running down my street at 6:30 in the morning. Moving forward, there still is a lot of cleanup that needs to be done. Nobody's been back. So I'm wondering when that's expected to be done. And 2, moving forward, who's going to maintain this property so that it does not get overgrown like the other side of my house near KDA has become that nobody wants to address. So that's my first question. My second question is actually new. It just came up after listening to Safe Harbor. I'm just curious if Safe Harbor has a minimum days of sobriety before being able to enter the program that would be typical based on my firsthand knowledge of such programs to do sober housing, and I'm glad that it's in the community, but just curious if there's a minimum day sobriety requirement.
Excuse me, Tanya, could you repeat that, please? I missed that. Sorry.
If there's a minimum day sobriety requirement to enter Safe Harbor.
Okay.
For any of the residents going. Regarding Clinton Aluminum, so I have the site plans. I'll pick up your pen in a minute. Michael gave you guys a B, I give you a C. And I give you a C because, well, first of all, let me just show everybody, this is what Clinton Aluminum is intended to look like once said and done. This is the site plan. Michael and I have been here since March 12th and having these conversations with you guys now for 7 months. The one side that mattered for us was the residents. When you look at the site plans, there's lots of green space up here. There's lots of green space over here. I just cannot fathom why this is butted right up. I understand that the mound, that's the picture here, is to be 15 feet. I understand from Michael that Mr. Towsley knew that we were not pleased with the 15-foot and that he contacted on our behalf Mr. Fowler the very next day after the Planning Commission meeting, which was October 9th. I understand that Mr. Fowler understood, asked Clinton Aluminum to raise it to 25 to 30 feet, not in the site plan, but I assume that that has been asked. As Michael stated, Clinton Aluminum was here and did report they have 3 shifts, which we stated. Mr. Fowler told me I was lying about that on August 19th. When summer does come and the building is done, there are going to be tractor trailers, lots of trucks, pitch trucks, fork trucks that go, you know, beep, beep, beep loudly when they're doing their work. It's going to be a nuisance. Again, after all of the discussion that we've had, I can't even understand how City Council felt good about letting the building, leaving all of that green space against nothing, really. There's no neighbors right there. That's all just land, but butting it up right to the 3 residents that live there. So I'm disheartened about that. You've put forth on the agenda tonight, under the committee of the whole, the TIF and the CRA agreement. And I guess as you go through that, I would like some explanations because, you know, I've said many times before you that, you know, I'm learning about the local legislation and things as we go. But I don't understand why this is being done under community reinvestment area. The site project is within the boundaries of the community reinvestment area. According to the Summit County website recorder, Clinton Aluminum doesn't even officially own this property yet, so I fail to see how it falls within that. It's never been talked about before. Metro Parks owned that property. Norton now owns the property. Clinton Aluminum's getting ready to own the property. There's not been any discussion about this happening under that ordinance. And I guess finally, with regards to Clinton Aluminum, I know that there's no reading tonight regarding that, but it was my intention to come to say that I do not support the 15-year 100% tax abatement. You stated to me, Mr. Kernan, that something is better than nothing, and I would agree in any situation that something is obviously better than nothing, but at whose expense? Property values around these properties, around this square of land are going to go down because of the industry that's going to come in there. It's at our expense. It's the people that pay taxes, real estate taxes. You all tried to sell this and say that this was good for the city. It's going to bring revenue. You're not going to be collecting any revenue for 15 years. I'm just very disheartened over that.
Ms. Vanderveen,
yeah.
your time's up.
Okay, just one more statement.
Real quick.
208 feet from the resident's property line to the building. Thank you. I thought that was nicely done.
Thank you. All right, that is it for communications from the public. At this time, I would move in to enter into executive session to consider the purchase, transfer, or sale of property for public purposes as defined in ORC Section 121.22 G2 and Section 3.12 2 of the Norton City Charter, and conferences with an attorney for the city concerning disputes involving the city that are the subject of pending or imminent court action as defined in ORC Section 121.22 G3 and Section 3.123 of the Norton City Charter.
Is that your motion?
Yes.
I'll second.
All right. I have a motion and a second. Will the clerk call the roll, please?
Mr. Kernan?
Yes.
Mr. Pelot?
Yes.
Mr. Gaynor?
Yes.
Mr. McClone?
Yes.
Mr. Towsley?
Yes.
Ms. Whipke?
I would like to invite then Mayor Zita, Mr. Fowler when he arrives, and Mr. Markey. Noticed everybody that while council is in an executive session, the audio and video is continuing to record live and uninterrupted. If you do not want your conversations recorded, please exit the council chambers.
The rest is legislation. if you want to stay, I mean, you don't, he already told you that yours is not going to be heard.
Until November 11th.
Right. So then the rest of this is just, you know, TIFs and. Mr. Kernan has it.
Oh, he has it. Okay. Guess I get that.
Okay, so there's no real reason for us to stay other than
I'm not
to
seeing
socialize
any.
with you, Carrie, and
Yeah, right. And help me with my minutes. Yeah, no, I don't see anything. And our public hearings are advertised in the Post. Do you get the Post?
I have access to it.
So no, I'm not seeing any.
So Charlotte had asked for,
Ms. Whipke?
should I send that to you?
I would. Okay, I'm just wondering, because you're just.
Nothing. I have no agenda.
It's pretty simple. One was, you'll see under 2019 legislation, you'll see the legislation which runs just numerical, and then there's a legislative index. The index is what you need to look at, and you can tell because it's got the date when it's last updated.
I did check that out.
So you'll be able to see on the column about the subject or for instance, news or
Yeah, I just, I'll put as much as I can, but there's not, and I don't even know how we cover this. This might be it. So I don't know.
Where do you live?
I live in Constantine.
Okay.
So, you know, they
And
asked.
that's part of West Side Region?
Yeah.
Okay. So, I think it's
those tractor trailers coming down. It's just gonna be, this is gonna be so beautiful and lovely. And it's gonna be a shit show on the roads.
Keep me in a little bit.
So you get approval tonight?
Can you do a bottom line?
Yeah. So I plan on breaking ground. I don't.
Well, the sales agreement says that they want to break ground this year.
And as you mentioned, the land hasn't transferred owners yet.
Correct.
I know that that has to happen. I think that's, we're looking at it pretty close. I think it's dependent upon council's action and then it actually transfers. So, you know, that has weather up and down. I'd like to think that, you know, we could have started this 6 months ago, but I mean, we made our presentation in March. It's just taking this long, legislation and everything to catch up and get to this point.
But in March though, we were being told there was no plans for this property.
The Clinton aluminum owners are very close to us. They're very, they don't like their name out there in public. So it was requested by them until they told us their name was not to be. So, matter of fact, we told them right as we go the whole time. And that's probably why you didn't hear anything about it, like their request. They're very proud of it already. They don't like their name out there.
To each his own.
The parking lot, driveway, all that, every driveway, the parking lot's gonna be paved.
There's a, this is actually, you don't mind me picking that
Not
up.
at all,
This
not
is
at all.
actually a fire lane, just for purposes of obviously getting around the building. That in itself is just gravel, so it should never be travel on, except with it. Never, because there's never a fire. But that's required by, Ohio Building Code, fire codes to have a fire.
Well, quite frankly, I love this. I love the drive-through. I think that will cut back on a lot of noise. I hope so.
Because right now, in their current situation, I mean, they'll pull a truck out and they have to load it outside. Because they have.
What's a decibel level back of our view? We aware of this?
I mean, I have no idea what that is.
I mean, we're not gonna be able to see this from our property because we're up here on the other, we're on the north side of the square of parcels here.
Okay, great.
So, but at night, because it's just a big field currently, you can hear what's going on down there. So, we're gonna hear this if it's loud.
And you're gonna call,
And
and then
complain.
we're gonna figure out how to, you know,
Right.
not have that happen.
Right.
Get 100%. So.
No, a little bit of noise was good. We were very worried about not having pavement because of dust.
I was worried about that, but my biggest concern was the 24-hour operation. I stated this from day one,
Yeah.
that I spoke to every board here about a 24-hour operation. Because if it's in my backyard, I'm telling you, it's gonna be low pay. I'm gonna be on the phone every day,
Yeah.
every night. I get up at 4 a.m. every day to go to work. I don't want to hear it. I'm sorry.
I understand what you're saying.
And like I told them, I didn't move into the industrial area and ask you to fix it. You're bringing it to me, so you have to protect me, so, anyway.
So, and that's.
It's a beautiful building, though.
And that is, thank you. You know, that comes down to, I think Steve, is the other gentleman.
Do you know, I got it in the office.
That's common practice, unfortunately.
So, the zoning code, we talk about noise, right, and issues like that, so there is something there that can be pointed to that's about, you know, the violation. How much that gets, I think it'd be just to have conversation. Eventually, they move in there, they're talking, I mean, that's what it all comes down to is, you know, what can they do if it's, they're leaving that overhead door open because it faces in the direction of the car.
Well, and I'm glad to hear you say that if we have a problem, the best place to go to is straight to them. And I know somebody that works for them, and he has said that it's a good business to work for, owner's a stand-up guy, and that he's open to those conversations. So if it comes to that, then that's exactly what we do. So, because we want to be good neighbors too. That just don't want the noise, you know, the nonsense, the lights.
Understood. And
You too.
So, yeah, a matter of fact, I didn't hear about the pipe that they discussed until after planning. I was called the next morning. He went to, and told, hey, you gotta get them out there. I said, okay, well, you know, they're gonna get wider, higher, or we're gonna decide steeper.
While people won't like it, I think it's doable. And that's where
It is definitely, I mean, it's a big mountain. I mean, it's gonna soak up a lot of noise too, because it's just a big, massive thing. So, you gotta come in and the front side here, otherwise it's tough to stay.
January 31st is his last day.
Thank you. Normally people say, I wouldn't have any of the time to do something. Waiting for doctor's appointments, waiting for the kids.
And the first comment came back from Clinton Women was, please make sure that that's.
Pulling from most everybody in Afghanistan and all the way to
Because they care.
Well, it's not too late. You can pick up the art.
totally lacking in that coordination.
Our issue is not
Sure. You can
at
tell
all.
from the
And we have
scars.
said to the city from the start that we are not opposed to prosperity.
I do it for the map.
We're not at all.
I do it
We
for
just
the
want to
map.
protect it. So that our
I think
property
that
values
sounds
don't
really
diminish.
weird. But for whatever reason, doing a pattern and doing the house, I don't know. When it works out perfect, there's just this little thrill that I did math from.
Sounds good to me, because, you know, you move your under certain set of circumstances, and, you know, and other circumstances have changed.
There you go. That's what you guys are doing. So it's, yeah, I mean, it's not something that we can go, oh, well, we'll just find this somewhere else. So it's not like that. And I appreciate that Clinton Women wants to be private and didn't want their name out there, and that you all had a whole name for this project, but that is a different issue for me. I feel that the city had a responsibility to say, yes, we absolutely have plans for this, but unfortunately, we cannot discuss that until this time. That would have been the better way to handle it, if you tell me month after month after month that there was no plans for this property. So, I just.
And I don't,
You said you wanted to work with me?
you mentioned Robert's Rules of Order, I don't know how long that.
I'm just
was
moral
too,
support.
but they may not understand. Anything that was shown to them, was shown to them, take it back. So, right, so officially, I mean, once you hand something.
We kind of like each other.
to city officials, it's public knowledge. So, you know, maybe
I'm so sorry.
I've seen something that took 4 years.
But again, then that
But I
puts,
get it.
that puts
Right.
them in the position to say, yes, but we can't discuss it.
Right.
I'm sure she was delighted.
Tell me that's none of your business. Don't tell me.
Oh, that's very nice. Look at that. I like the edging. And how it's kind of broken up. Did you design it?
Yeah, we saw like things like this, and we said we want to do something other than just having a straight concrete.
Right.
That's what we did. In the back, you can see this is about 30 foot wide, 2 back there, because each one of these is 10 foot.
Okay.
So that back there just has the rim around it because it slopes down like this.
Ah.
So we couldn't do that because it would have been almost impossible for them to make the squares in that on that kind of a hill.
Yeah.
But it came out nice. I think it
Very
looks good.
nice. Yeah. I bet you're pleased that's done, huh?
Oh, well, now we have to have all the side work.
Yeah.
Oops. All that like filled in.
Right.
So we have a guy that's giving us a quote on doing that. You know, I don't know when he's going to start because it needs it.
Mhm.
It makes it look horrible. It's just like.
I know.
like-
And then if the rains come, it'll.
well, actually, it's nice because it funnels the water away.
Oh, does it? Okay. Well, maybe you do that for planting ideas.
butted up right into this corner, why couldn't it have been a little more centralized in the acreage? You're stating that that's not possible because of the lay of the land.
It is. In fact, this is significantly lower than the street level, as you know.
Yes.
We talked about that.
Yes.
So-
And then this goes up.
And the rate, well, the building has to be flat.
Right,
Right? You
right.
can't follow the
I
land
get
and
it.
slope.
I get it.
So, the more you go this way, the more dirt you end up moving.
Right.
And it would have made these drives more difficult on the street.
Right.
In terms of going in this direction, this land crests, probably right about here, it starts going
Right.
down the other way.
Right.
This was from an overall plan of all of that property,
Right.
and you want to start on one side and go in another direction.
Right.
The hill over here is getting steeper, so,
Right.
and it goes down to, I don't know what, if there's a creek or something
Yeah.
down there that.
There's a couple of them on the property.
It's kind of messy as you get down
Yeah.
towards the west side of it.
No, this is lovely. I mean, and if this is the end project, if this is actually what it's gonna look like, it's beautiful.
That's what it's gonna look like.
It's beautiful.
If you said it's beautiful, that's exactly what it's.
I mean, it's
I will
very
say, I
nice.
don't know if they're gonna put that sign on the building, but,
I mean, this is absolutely beautiful, for what it is, you know?
an improvement over what they have now.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
They do great business.
They do. There's a lot of people over there.
I appreciate your explanation.
That's why I came here tonight. I might as well, I'm sitting back there wondering why I'm even here. But, it's good to have this opportunity to get into the executive sessions and continue to talk. We have to be cool.
Here we are. I could care less. All good.
Right, I haven't said anything that I would take back, so.
No, nor would I, so. Yeah, I really appreciate the time.
No problem.
Absolutely, it was very nice meeting you. Absolutely.
And your name on it?
Time.
What's time?
Yeah. It's okay. That's fine.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Good luck.
Yeah, we're gonna pass off the meetings. Oh. Okay. Well, let's go try and have a conversation.
How did I get Rhonda?
That's so good.
You brought your backup.
Yeah.
Yes.
You have moral support.
Right.
Yes, sir.
So, apologize if I should have written my name down and got spoken, because I was here for Clinton Overland. So that's why we just speak about all that stuff. Yes. He put into the second hand.
Yeah, I mean, so I think it dealt with that problem.
Good.
But I, Joe, Mr. Kerner, President Council, is pretty, so he want, in the future, to get up and respond,
Okay.
yes, to be recognized.
Yeah,
I'm sure you would
I
recognize.
was kind of.
I didn't, I didn't know who you were, so.
Right, I didn't, right.
Does Mr. Kerner know?
I don't think so. I mean, Robert had asked me to be here, so it was easy, other than the mayor who I've met. He's the
Okay.
only other person I know, so.
Okay. Well,
And he's not here, so.
I think, yeah, I don't know, but, I have a feeling he's gonna leave, I think he's something else to do then.
Got it.
So, but I think that probably would be that family, because they only consistent concern. So, sure, a lot more effective there. And then,
Hopefully that negatively affect them there.
not yet. Yeah, like you said,
Well,
7 months.
And that's why, and I had said this at the planning meeting last week, we want to talk about these things up front, because it's a lot easier to fix them.
Of course, and
And after the
that's,
fact, so.
yeah, and that's really, that's kind of the way it should be, but it's difficult for people who don't work in government agencies to understand that you can't disclose things, you can't talk about things, and change things for the whole city, just so that, you can't require all the municipal buildings to be known. Some don't have space, some don't have room. So it's been a difficult, it's been a learning curve for everybody.
Hopefully this project will go smoothly and get up and running. Maybe a few hiccups, but that's what we do. We talk, we communicate, we figure out how to solve it. So, as you said, she felt better after we talked, so.
It's really difficult, it goes through the administration. It's such a difficult part. Yeah.
Figure you would have something like knitted all the way down the
I'm
aisleway. She's already into her second book over here.
How you doing?
You missed all that tea.
Oh, yeah.
That's too good to be true. Done in there, now back in here.
Carrie, any Motrin?
I'm sorry?
Do you have any Motrin? You can start.
Okay.
That's why I was late. And the guy said, I said, why'd you do one? I said, because I got a meeting at 7, I gotta get back for it. He said, could you just stay till 6:30 for me?
Stay till 6:30 and you see the commissioner.
Yeah. Jack down there? No. I call the regular council meeting for Tuesday, October 15th, 2019, back to order. Moving on to Committee of the Whole. I'd like to acknowledge the budget reports from September 2019. Letter B, Planning Commission Resolution Number CUP 3 2019, Safe Harbor Norton. Again, we're not going to take any action on that tonight. We're having a public hearing on that in November, so that'll be on the agenda in November. Letter C, TIF and CRA Agreement for Clinton Aluminum. Ms. Whipke.
Thank you, Mr. President. We're looking at ordinance number 117, 2019, and I guess ordinance number 118, 20. I'm going to take them one at a time. The 117 is basically for the TIF monies that this document basically allows Norton to receive the tax dollars that would have been collected by Summit County, and it will be putting them into an account to help development in that area. And what is it? Was this like 40%?
Yeah, it's like a 60-40-ish. Yeah,
30 to 40.
Yeah, it really depends on tax rates at the time. But the two ordinances together, the first is the CRA, which is the abatement ordinance. The school district and the company and the city have negotiated a compensation agreement for both the abatement, the CRA, and the TIF.
That's the 118, right?
That's the 118. And the abatement will last for 15 years. If approved, will last for 15 years. And then the last 15 years, so year 1 to 15, there'll be an abatement. Year 16 to 30, there'll be the TIF. And the TIF is what you talked about. It treats the property taxes and puts them into a separate fund that allows the city to use it to help recoup costs that the city put into the adjacent properties, essentially. So and we get to keep the county's portion.
And we did get the school has already taken care of their part for.
That's correct.
118.
Schools last night approved a resolution at their meeting last night to adopt the compensation agreement that's required under the revised code for both the CRA, the abatement, and the TIF.
And the advantage to getting this, looking to waive the second and third readings, it passes an emergency so that we can get this in the process of getting started.
That and closing schedule for the transfer of the property. Yes.
It's my understanding we had to wait until tonight to do anything because we were kind of waiting on the school
So there's
board
two
to do
things
what
that
they
had to happen
do.
before we were allowed to consider our ordinances. The first is we had to give notice to the communities that were losing jobs. So Clinton's relocating from Akron, from Clinton, and from New Franklin, some jobs. And so we had to give each of those communities 30 days notice that we're going to consider an ordinance, and that just so they were aware, and that an abatement was being offered. That's just a statutory process that's in the revised code. And the other thing we had to wait for was for the schools to approve. So we delivered that notice in mid-September-ish. It expired last week, second week of September. That 30-day period would have expired last week. We are not allowed as a city to adopt a CRA ordinance granting the abatement until the schools have approved it. And so the other thing we had to wait for was the schools to act, and they acted last night. So now those two steps are done. The city is now allowed to consider the legislation that's before you tonight.
Well, then I would ask, before we go any further on this, can I put these both together as 117 and 118 and move them as a consent, or do we need to do them?
Oh, just to the right, just the agenda? Yes, yeah, just to move them to the agenda. I don't see a
Yes.
problem with that, but.
Okay. Anybody else?
Just for clarification, the TIF would not even be in effect for 15 years?
That's correct. It wouldn't be until you can only have one exemption on property at a time. So while the CRA is in effect for the first 15 years, the TIF can't be in effect. Once the CRA ends, then the TIF takes over.
So just for my curiosity, what's the triggering mechanism in 15 years?
There'll be an exemption application filed, and what we all hope, because these are being done statewide, so we're gonna talk to the fiscal office and make sure their systems, their computer systems, are keyed correctly, so that they know once the one exemption ends, they have to put it into the other exemption. So there's going to be some reliance on a computer system. We could try to calendar for 15 years. That's always difficult, but that's what everyone thinks will be the mechanic, is that those computer systems will have that logged in, and it'll happen.
Okay, thank you.
If we start some type of running file or running list, there's certain things that are supposed to happen in certain years.
Yeah.
A master file, more or less, just saying, hey, in the year 2035, this is supposed to happen.
Mm-hmm.
As long as council clerk is probably the best place for it, looks at that at the beginning of each year and adds anything new to it that comes up. I mean, would we look at something?
Yeah, I would say any type of tickler system we can put together, I think, would make sense. I mean, and I would have as many people as possible on that system, just as you lose employees, gain employees, people
Right.
transition. So I would have the administrative officer, finance director, clerk, whoever's in charge at the time, all part of that system, so that hopefully when you get to that point, to Mr. Towsley's point, 15 years from now is a long time.
Right.
And we're all keeping track of it.
Does the county have responsibility there too, or is that simply Norton's solely?
Well, the county, once we file the application, it should be the county's responsibility, right? So they should key it in and it should happen. But to your point, who's going to make sure it happens? And that's probably something we need to address on our side as well.
And I would think you'd be able to set an alert even in the calendar, even 15 years out, where it would prompt you at the beginning of January that these items are supposed to be taken care of.
This is a regular council meeting, so we only have communications from the public during that section of the agenda. Council can suspend its own rules, but it would require a motion and a second and an affirmative vote if council wants to take comments. I've seen a hand back there.
I would like to make a motion, basically just based on the fact that the attempt is to pass this tonight, and the public's never had an opportunity, so they at least deserve an opportunity in my mind.
Okay, there's a motion to suspend the rules and allow comment on item C on committee of the whole.
I'll second.
There's a motion and a second. Would the clerk call the roll, please?
Mr. Towesley?
Yes.
Mr. Pelot?
Yes.
Mr. Gaynor?
No.
Mr. McClone?
Yes.
Ms. Whipke?
Problem?
That's a yes?
Yep, that's a yes.
Yes.
Mr. Kernan?
Yes. All right. It'll be just like just like communications from the public. 5 minutes. Please give your name and address when you come up to the podium. Anyone have any comments? Mr. Casey.
Joe Casey, 3141 Monterey Drive. Thank you. I was under the understanding when it was a communication from the whole that we were able to do this. That's why I was raising my hand. I just want to know, with the agreement that we have with the 15-year, who monitors to make sure that everybody's in compliance? For example, if they have to have so many employees in order to get the abatement, who monitors that?
Yeah, there's under the ordinances, there's a tax incentive review committee that the city already has one for its TIF that is supposed to meet annually, which it does, and review performance by the company. The agreement, the CRA agreement that grants the abatement, which is really the big benefit because the company doesn't benefit from the TIF, they only benefit from the abatement. There's if they don't meet their promises within the agreement, the money can be clawed back. So there's pretty stiff penalties in there. The abatement can be terminated and the money can be clawed back. So that committee gets appointed by council. There'll be an ordinance. No? I thought council appointed that.
We only have 2 members. It goes through the county.
Oh, it goes to the county, that's right.
We have 2 members that sit, Mr. Spizak and myself are the 2 members.
So that group meets every year in the spring and will review that incentive to make sure there's compliance.
What's the term on that? I don't remember.
What's that?
For the Tax Incentive Review Board?
I don't remember. Yeah.
3 years.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right. Any further discussion regarding this? Questions?
This time I make a motion to add ordinance 117, 2019 and 118, 2019 as a consent agenda to our agenda tonight with emergency language and looking to waive second and third readings on both.
I'll second.
There's a motion and a second to add ordinances number 117, 2019 and ordinance number 118, 2019 to tonight's agenda. Any further discussion? Will the clerk call the roll, please?
Ms. Whipke?
Yes.
Mr. Pelot?
Yes.
Mr. Gaynor?
Yes.
Mr. McClone?
Yes.
Mr. Towesley?
Yes.
Mr. Kernan?
Yes. Letter D, budget amendment. Ms. Whipke?
Thank you, Mr. President. This is for some budget and transfer amendments. We're looking at ordinance number 119, 2019. We need to get this legislation done due to the fact that there's no funds left in our transfer fund, and these need to be addressed before the end of the month. So we're looking to move $500,000 total, and it's shown how it's going to be used in Exhibit A. To break it down under the miscellaneous, $200,000 would be going for Fund 509 for the Cleveland-Massillon Road widening, and Fund 170 for the road program. The actual amount is $198,705, but we're rounding it up to $200,000. Under the parks, then, this is for the CDBG, goes hand in hand for the CDBG, where we did the walking trail. We need to get that paid, the $55,000, so we need to put the money in there as it's not in the, there's no money in the line. We have did apply for a 40,000 grant. It's my understanding that we did receive that last Friday. The money is available, but it has to go into a revenue line before we can use it. So we have to go ahead and put out the 55,000, and then we'll be able to get the 40 back after that. So the reality of it is we're only paying 15,000 out for our new paths up here at the park. And I think there were some handicap spaces put in, a lot of work being done. Then under the permissive fund, we needed 88,000 to pay to Kenmore Construction for where we had fixed the Worcester Road drainage issue over there. And then another 100,000 is to go in on getting the western end of Johnson Road repaired. But anyway, we do need to get this done before the end of the month, and due to the fact I'll be asking to get this put on for first reading tonight in ER language and waiving the third reading on the 28th, and that'll be soon enough to get this taken care of for us.
Okay.
So I make that motion, if nobody's got any questions, I make that motion to add it to the agenda for tonight.
I do have one question. And I don't know if anybody can answer this because Mr. Messner's not here. But when we receive the grant money of 40,000, what account does that reimburse to?
It went into the, oh wait, that's what I just told you. It actually went into the, a revenue line. And if he gave me that number, he did tell me about this. We've already gotten it. We received it last week, Friday.
Okay,
But it's in a revenue line.
There's a separate CDBG fund because we're required to separate that money out. So there's a separate account for that. The
Yeah,
money gets deposited.
I was confused thinking it was still coming in, so.
No, we have it. It's just that we have to use our money right at the
Okay.
moment to pay it out first.
Got it, thank you.
What was the 88,000 that you referred to?
That's for where we fixed that drainage issue on Worcester Road, on that where it got washed out at the creek-like area.
Down by J.R. Wheel.
All right, I don't see it on the exhibit.
It should be in the permissive. I believe it's
Yeah,
in
it
the
is under
permissive
the
tax line
permissive. It
item.
just says the maintenance and repairs. They didn't actually put it down there.
Okay, I'm sorry. I thought you said then 100,000 went for Johnson Road.
Yeah.
Correct.
There's 100 going for Johnson Road. I don't know why that's actually would be 188, and we've only got 100 going over on the printout here.
Right.
That's what you're asking me.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, so these are all very good questions.
Okay.
So I would say if you want to hold the reading tonight until we get them answered, either in any event, we need it done by the 28th of October. So however you guys want to handle it. I know it was a little bit of a last-minute addition, so we want to make sure we have time to. Mr. Messner wasn't available at the end of the week last week, so I want to make sure that we are all on the same page.
Well, I mean, I guess I would be okay with putting it on for first reading, and then we can just amend the exhibit or
However you want to handle it.
whatever we want to do.
However you want to handle it.
I'm good with moving it forward, and then we'll catch the details. When I'd spoken to him today, this is how he's explaining it to me.
Okay.
All right, I'll second.
There's a motion and a second to add ordinance 119, 2019 to tonight's agenda for its first reading only. Any further discussion? Clerk, call the roll, please.
Ms. Whipke?
Yes.
Mr. Pelot?
Yes.
Mr. Gaynor?
Yes.
Mr. McClone?
Yes.
Mr. Towsley?
Yes.
Mr. Kernan?
Yes.
Mr. President,
Yes, Mr. Towsley.
before we move on in the agenda, I was just hoping I could ask the administration for an update on Johnson Road since we just spoke about it.
If you'd be so kind, I have an update actually.
Oh, okay,
During
great.
my report, I'd be glad to give it to you at that point.
That works.
Perfect. Anything else under Committee of the Whole? All right, consideration of minutes, the minutes of the regular council meeting of September 23rd, 2019. Are there any additions, deletions, or corrections to those minutes? Hearing none, they will be accepted as submitted. The minutes of the committee work session of October 7th, 2019. Are there any additions, deletions, or corrections to those? They will then be accepted as submitted. Reports from officers, boards, and commissions. Mayor Zito.
Thank you. I'm going to defer to Mr. Fowler, and then I have a host of public service announcements at the end of the meeting.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Fowler.
Well, I'll start with Johnson Road. That was number 2 on my list, but I'll start with number 1. So today was the pre-construction meeting for the reconstruction of Johnson Road. The contract has a completion date of November 15th. You'll see some signage that'll be going up. There'll be a temporary detour when they're doing the construction. I'll have to check with the engineer to confirm the detour, but I believe so they're going to send the traffic north to Greenwich, north on Medina to Greenwich, east on Greenwich to Hametown, south on Hametown to Johnson. But that construction should be starting by the end of the month.
Do you have any idea how long that closure will be? Just a day or two?
I think it's only going to be during their construction, like when they're laying the asphalt. Now it'll be open to local traffic, so residents there'll be intermittent. So when they're laying the asphalt in front of a residential property, like when it's in front of their driveway, that'll be the only time that they would not have access. But local traffic will be maintained at all times. It'll be the other the through traffic. It's a fairly busy street. So that you should see construction starting here in the next 2 weeks. But they have a completion date of November 15th. You may notice, some of you, State Route 21, the sheriff is cleaning up 21 with refuse. They have prisoners that are coming out on Fridays, and they clean up 21. So we want to thank them. They're partnering with us to help that. It should happen over the next few weeks, weather permitting. As Ms. Whipke alluded, the Columbia Woods Walking Trail Phase 1 was completed on yesterday. They still have some seating and things to go, some final touches to put on but it is open and walkable. I would encourage everyone to go down. It's kind of a nice amenity. Ms. Whipke also alluded to the handicap ramps or ramps for disability access. We did install one yesterday at CW1, so now our CW1 is accessible for those with disabilities. We will be following up with CW2 in the next few weeks, but all three of our pavilions by the end of this year will be accessible for those with disabilities. A little update on the water and sewer. The water and sewer lines have been installed on Cleveland Massillon. They're essentially just putting in the concrete pavement restoration. Hopefully all the restoration of pavement and the road will be open next week. So optimistic that that's moving forward. I know they made it up to Jackson today. New Park Drive construction started. They'll be working on the storm sewer. We've been communicating with the businesses in this area, making sure that we meet their expectations for accessibility. There's also a International Welcome Center is having a kickoff dinner on the 28th. I normally would have given this to the mayor, but it's Thursday the 28th. If anybody would like to attend, I have packages for those interested. And then we did get our bids back for the Mungo, and we'll be making a recommendation to council in the coming weeks.
Thank you. Mr. Markey.
I don't have anything, but other than I received a message from Mr. Messner just letting me know that the $188,000, 88 was paid, which took the fund down, and so we're increasing it by $100,000 to account for Johnson Road. So that's where the 188 comes from.
So that 100,000 is correct. That is what we're
100,000 is correct.
transferring.
88,000 was already paid. It spent
Okay.
the fund down. We need to appropriate additional funds to make our next payment of 100,000.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank
Good
you.
job, Ron.
All right. Introduction of new legislation. Ordinance number 113, 2019. Ms. Whipke.
Thank you, Mr. President. I introduce ordinance 113, 2019 for its first reading. Ask clerk to read it, please.
An ordinance declaring the improvements to certain real property within the city to be a public purpose, describing the public improvements to be made to directly benefit such parcels, exempting such improvements from ad valorem real property taxation, requiring the owner of the improvements to make service payments in lieu of ad valorem real property taxes, and establishing a municipal improvement tax increment equivalent fund for the deposit of the service payments in lieu of ad valorem property taxes, all pursuant to sections 5709, 5709.42, and 5709.43 of the revised code and declaring an emergency.
This is for a TIF for the 2661 Barber Road property, formerly known as Old Red Pepper Place, and it's first reading only.
Thank you. Ordinance number 114, 2019, Ms. Whipke.
Thank you, Mr. President. I introduced ordinance 114, 2019 for its first reading. Ask clerk to read it, please.
An ordinance declaring the improvements to certain real property within the city to be a public purpose, describing the public improvements to be made to directly benefit such parcels, exempting such improvements from ad valorem real property taxation, requiring the owner of the improvements to make service payments in lieu of ad valorem real property taxes, and establishing a municipal improvement tax increment equivalent fund for the deposit of the service payments in lieu of ad valorem property taxes, all pursuant to sections 5709.40, 5709.42, and 5709.43 of the revised code and declaring an emergency.
And this is for the TIF on the new dollar store that went into the Loyal Oak area, first reading only.
Thank you. Ordinance number 115, 2019, Ms. Whipke.
Thank you, Mr. President. I introduce ordinance 115, 2019 for its first reading. Ask clerk to read it, please.
An ordinance authorizing the purchase of real property from the Summit County Land Reutilization Corporation and declaring an emergency.
And this is for purchasing or acquiring the AP gas station, what's left of it by the tracks, not to exceed $25,000. And it's going to contain emergency language, first reading only.
Thank you. Resolution number 116, 2019, Ms. Whipke.
I introduce ordinance 116, 2019 for its first reading. Ask clerk to read it, please.
A resolution accepting the amounts and rates as determined by the Summit County Budget Commission and authorizing the necessary tax levies and certifying them to the Summit County Fiscal Office and declaring an emergency.
And this is basically a boilerplate type legislation we do every year. We need to have this back to the fiscal officer in the county before the end of October. It does contain emergency language, and I would like to motion to waive the second and third readings.
I'll second.
There's a motion and a second to waive the second and third readings of resolution number 116, 2019. Is there any discussion regarding waiver? Will the clerk call the roll, please?
Ms. Whipke?
Yes.
Mr. Pelot?
Yes.
Mr. Gaynor?
Yes.
Mr. McClone?
Yes.
Mr. Towsley?
Yes.
Mr. Kernan?
Yes.
At this time, I motion to adopt ordinance 116, 2019.
I'll second.
There's a motion and a second to adopt resolution number 116, 2019. Any further discussion? Would the clerk call the roll, please?
Ms. Whipke?
Yes.
Mr. Pelot?
Yes.
Mr. Gaynor?
Yes.
Mr. McClone?
Yes.
Mr. Towsley?
Yes.
Mr. Kernan?
Yes. Ordinance number 117, 2019. Ms. Whipke.
Thank you, Mr. President. I introduced ordinance 117, 2019 for its first reading. Ask clerk to read it, please.
An ordinance declaring the improvements to certain real property within the city to be a public purpose, describing the public improvements to be made to directly benefit such parcels, exempting such improvements from ad valorem real property taxation, requiring the owner of the improvements to make service payments in lieu of ad valorem real property taxes, and establishing a municipal improvement tax increment equivalent fund for the deposit of service payments in lieu of ad valorem property taxes, all pursuant to sections 5709.40, 5709.42, and 5709.43 of the revised code and declaring an emergency.
This is the TIF that we had discussed for Clinton aluminum earlier. And at this point, I motion to waive the second and third readings on ordinance 117, 2019.
I'll second.
There's a motion and a second to waive the second and third readings of ordinance number 117, 2019. Is there any discussion regarding waiver?
Yes, Mr. President.
Mr. Towsley?
I cannot in good conscience support this, the waiving, for the reason that this does personally affect residents, and it's just being introduced tonight on both 117 and 118. I might as well just make that clear now.
Okay. Any further discussion regarding waiver? Would the clerk call the roll, please?
Ms. Whipke?
Yes.
Mr. Pelot?
Yes.
Mr. Gaynor?
Yes.
Mr. McClone?
Yes.
Mr. Towesley?
No.
Mr. Kernan?
Yes.
A motion to adopt ordinance 117, 2019.
I'll second.
There's a motion second to adopt ordinance 117, 2019. Any further discussion regarding the ordinance? Would the clerk call the roll, please?
Ms. Whipke?
Yes.
Mr. Pilat?
Yes.
Mr. Gaynor?
Yes.
Mr. McClone?
Yes.
Mr. Towesley?
Yes.
Mr. Kernan?
Yes. Ordinance number 118, 2019. Ms. Whipke.
I introduce ordinance 118, 2019 for its first reading. Ask clerk to read it, please.
An ordinance authorizing real property exemptions with respect to certain real property within the City of Norton Community Reinvestment Area for the purpose of encouraging economic development within that area, authorizing the administrative officer to execute and deliver a community reinvestment area tax abatement agreement with Clinton Aluminum Distribution Incorporated and declaring an emergency.
This time I motion to waive the second and third readings on ordinance 118, 2019. This is for the CRA documentation for Clinton Aluminum.
I'll second.
There's a motion second to waive the second and third readings. Is there any discussion regarding waiver? Would the clerk call the roll, please?
Ms. Whipke?
Yes.
Mr. Pilat?
Yes.
Mr. Gaynor?
Yes.
Mr. McClone?
Yes.
Mr. Towesley?
No.
Mr. Kernan?
Yes.
This time I make a motion to adopt ordinance 118, 2019.
I'll second.
There's a motion and a second to adopt ordinance number 118, 2019. Is there any further discussion? Would the clerk call the roll, please?
Ms. Whipke?
Yes.
Mr. Pilat?
Yes.
Mr. Gaynor?
Yes.
Mr. McClone?
Yes.
Mr. Towesley?
Yes.
Mr. Kernan?
Yes.
Thank you.
Ordinance number 112, 2019. Mr. Towesley.
Thank you, Mr. President. I offer ordinance 112, 2019 for its second reading and ask the clerk to read it, please.
Were we going to add 119?
We got to do 119, don't we?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Gonna add
I
119.
forgot to write that in. I'm sorry. We'll back up there. Ordinance number 119, 2019. Ms. Whipke.
Thank you, Mr. President. I introduce ordinance 119, 2019 for its first reading. Ask clerk to read it, please.
An ordinance to amend the appropriations for the current expenses of the City of Norton for the fiscal year ending December 31st, 2019, authorizing transfers from the general fund for calendar year 2019 and declaring an emergency.
Okay, and this is on the discussion we had for moving around the monies in order to make sure we had monies available to pay for the different things, minus the $88,000 we already paid out for Worcester Road.
Right.
And it's first reading only.
Thank you. Now ordinance number 112, 2019. Mr. Towesley.
Thank you, Mr. President. I offer ordinance number 112, 2019 for its second reading and ask the clerk to read it, please.
An ordinance to amend section 432.32 of the codified ordinances of the City of Norton, Ohio, and declaring an emergency.
Thank you. This is legislation to increase fines for running through a school bus light from $500 to $750. We had some conflict last time. I'm getting a request to waive the third reading. Can anybody speak to that, why I'm getting that request?
This, what we have here is the language that we had the last time, which, as I recall, we discussed, mirrored most of the communities around us. I know that, Mr. Gaynor, you had some concerns about the legislation.
I'm satisfied.
You're satisfied with that?
I'm satisfied.
Okay.
So is there a need for waiving a reading on this?
Just allows it to go into effect sooner. I mean, the need's there, obviously. Would they say you've had 8 school bus passings?
Had one since we discussed this. So I would suggest that we waive it and move it on as soon as possible.
I can do that. Part of me says another reading puts it in the papers more and gives it more attention, but I will make a motion to waive the third reading.
I'll second and ask the administration maybe they could do a press release, and that way it gets out into the papers.
We have a motion and a second to waive the third reading of ordinance number 112, 2019. Further discussion regarding the waiver. Clerk, call the roll, please.
Mr. Towesley?
Yes.
Mr. Pilat?
Yes.
Mr. McClone?
Yes.
Mr. Gaynor?
Yes.
Ms. Whipke?
Yes.
Mr. Kernan?
Yes.
At this time, I'd like to make a motion to adopt ordinance 112, 2019.
I'll second.
There's a motion and a second to adopt ordinance number 112, 2019. Any further discussion? Would the clerk call the roll, please?
Mr. Towesley?
Yes.
Mr. Pilat?
Yes.
Mr. Gaynor?
Yes.
Mr. McClone?
Yes.
Ms. Whipke?
Yes.
Mr. Kernan?
Yes. Ordinance number 102, 2019. Ms. Whipke.
Thank you, Mr. President. I introduce ordinance 102, 2019 for its third reading. Ask clerk to read it, please.
An ordinance to authorize the administrative officer to enter into an agreement with Ganley Ford for the purchase of one F-550 4x4 dump truck in an amount not to exceed $55,225.
At this time, I motion to adopt ordinance 102, 2019.
I'll second.
There's a motion and a second to adopt ordinance number 102, 2019. Any further discussion? Would the clerk call the roll, please?
Ms. Whipke?
Yes.
Mr. Gaynor?
Yes.
Mr. Pilat?
Yes.
Mr. McClone?
Yes.
Mr. Towesley?
Yes.
Mr. Kernan?
Yes. Ordinance number 103, 2019. Ms. Whipke.
I introduce ordinance 103, 2019 for its third reading. Ask clerk to read it, please.
An ordinance to authorize the administrative officer to enter into an agreement with Valley Freightliner and Western Star for the purchase of a M2 chassis in an amount not to exceed $77,850.
The reason, these are all trying to get us ready for the winter coming up so that we can better do our plowing and such for the roads. At this time, I motion to adopt ordinance 103, 2019.
There's a motion and a second to adopt ordinance number 103, 2019. Is there any further discussion? Would the clerk call the roll, please?
Ms. Whipke?
Yes.
Mr. Pilat? Or was it Mr. Gaynor? Sorry.
Yes.
Mr. McClone?
Yes.
Mr. Towesley?
Yes.
Mr. Pilat?
Yes.
Mr. Kernan?
Yes. Ordinance number 107, 2019. Ms. Whipke.
I introduce ordinance 107, 2019 for its third reading and ask clerk to read it, please.
An ordinance adopting a general fund policy for the city.
Well, that one was a short one. Okay, this is basically to make sure that we do have the monies established and they're preserved in the general fund. At this time, I make a motion to adopt ordinance 107, 2019.
I'll second.
There's a motion and a second to adopt ordinance 107, 2019. Is there any further discussion? Would the clerk call the roll, please?
Ms. Whipke?
Yes.
Mr. Pilat?
Yes.
Mr. Gaynor?
Yes.
Mr. McClone?
Yes.
Mr. Towesley?
Yes.
Mr. Kernan?
Yes. Ordinance number 108, 2019 falls to me. I offer ordinance number 108, 2019 for its third reading and ask the clerk to read it, please.
An ordinance authorizing the acceptance of donated land by the city of Barberton to the city of Norton and declaring an emergency.
At this time, I move to adopt ordinance number 108, 2019.
I'll second.
There's a motion and a second for adoption. Is there any further discussion? Would the clerk call the roll, please?
Mr. Kernan?
Yes.
Mr. Towesley?
Yes.
Mr. Gaynor?
Yes.
Mr. McClone?
Yes.
Mr. Pilat?
Yes.
Ms. Whipke?
Yes.
Public service announcements. Mayor Zita?
Thank you, Mr. President. I have a few of them, so please bear with me as I move through. I feel all of them are important to announce this evening. Norton United presents Panther Place every Thursday in October from 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. at Grace Church. It's for 9th to 12th graders to enjoy various fun activities. Then on Norton Historical Society information meeting on Thursday, October 17th, starting at 7 p.m. That'll be in the Norton Fire Department Training Center. It's a Save Our School meeting to restore the last remaining one-room schoolhouse that's currently up in Norton, up in Loyal Oak. Norton Women's Club Craft Fair and Gift Show. That'll be Saturday, October 19th from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. at the Norton Elementary School. Backham Food Pantry, the annual dinner and silent auction is Saturday, October 19th from 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. You can purchase tickets in person at 939 Norton Avenue, or for details, visit www.backham.org. Trick or Treat is Saturday, October 26th from 5 to 7 p.m. Once again, Trick or Treat is Saturday, October 26th from 5 to 7 p.m. I know that a number of people keep asking about when Trick or Treat is. It is hopefully all going to be that evening so that we can allow for our safety forces to saturate the community and provide safety for all our little trick-or-treaters. We have bulk pickup day from Republic Waste is Saturday, October 26th. Must be picked up by noon. You can call, it's 234-738-9348 to schedule a pickup. The deadline to schedule the pickup is Thursday, October 24th. Norton Fire and EMS annual pancake breakfast at the main fire station on Greenwich Road, Saturday, October 26th from 7 a.m. to 11 a.m. We also have Drug Take Back Day on Saturday, October 26th from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. at the Norton Medicine Shop. You can drop off any unwanted medications to be properly disposed of. And last but certainly not least, the City of Norton has sponsored or has partnered with the Akron Children's Hospital annual toy drive. That's actually currently running from October 1st through November the 8th. We can drop off any new unwrapped gift cards, or checks made out to the Akron Children's Hospital. You can drop them off here at City Hall in a designated donation bin. That is a program that will start, it's for the Christmas holiday, but it's to provide Christmas gifts for the patients in Akron Children's Hospital and maybe siblings that on one of the kids that might be in the hospital, if they've got kids there with a parent that are unable to purchase gifts and that, they're going to use some of that to take care of that as well. But we feel that it's a very worthwhile event, and that we would like to participate with that in that event with Akron Children's Hospital. So asking any resident and all residents to get involved. That's all I have this evening. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Are there any public service announcements from council? Hearing none, then, is there a motion to adjourn? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
We're adjourned.
Three questions.
3 questions. What?